is called The Sand Ship, and it's going to be published in a magazine called A Cappella Zoo in September. The Sand Ship. We liked it when they built the ship. Before, there was just a big sandpit at that end of the playground. Sometimes it had dog dirt in it. But when we got there one Saturday morning, after we'd been to the shop with Dad so we could get our sweets and he could get his paper and his can, there was a ship in it. Gypsy said it must have sailed there in the night. I told her they'd built it during the week whilst we were at school. The ship was painted red. It had portholes in its sides. It had a gangplank which you could walk along up onto the ship without touching the sand. We claimed the ship. I said I would be the captain and Gypsy could be the crew. First, I made her scrub the deck to get rid of all the sand so we could lay our penny sweets out. I always got cola bottles, fried eggs and gummy bears. I pointed at a big fat seagull that was watching us from the fence and nicked one of Gypsy's flying saucers when she looked up at it. Dad was sat on the blue bench over by the football pitch reading his paper, so she couldn't tell on me anyway. A little boy tried to come up onto the ship. His mum was at the other end of the playground pushing a baby on the swings, so I blocked his way. I told Gypsy to pretend she had a hook hand. He jumped down into the sand and ran right to the edge of the sandpit. He crouched there and stuck his hands in, started to dig. He kept looking at our ship when he didn't think we were looking at him. I saw him pull something green from the sand. "Ben, time to go," his mum shouted. He buried it again. Gypsy had to dig for a long time to find it when he'd gone. It was our first piece of treasure. It wasn't like the glass we normally found at the playground. It was all scratched so you couldn't see through it, and it wasn't sharp but smooth like a stone. When Dad shouted at us to go, we buried it and pressed 2 sticks into the sand on top of it. The next Saturday, there were lots of seagulls perched on the side of the ship. They flew up into the air when the playground gate clanged shut, and we ran round flapping our arms and squawking to keep them away. I told Gypsy to dig for our treasure, and I ran up the gangplank. The ship had been attacked. There were drawings and writing all over the insides, done in black felt tip pen. Gypsy said they must be pirate names. There were cans too. They looked the same as Dad's. I tipped one up and the last of the smelly brown liquid dribbled onto my fingers. They were sticky for ages, even after I'd wiped them on my jeans. I told Gypsy to come and throw the cans overboard. Then, because she still hadn't found our treasure, I went to show her where to dig. We couldn't find the glass. We shouldn't have left the X marks the spot on top of it. Someone else must have dug it up. Sand hurts when it gets too far up behind your nails, so I watched Gypsy dig deeper and deeper. She pulled a long, dark rope of seaweed from the sand. It smelt funny, a bit like the fish section in Morrison's. Gypsy wanted to take it home, but I wouldn't let her because I said it'd make our room stink. Other Saturdays, we found other treasures, lots more glass. My favourite pieces were pale pink, and the best thing was the shells. When we took them to Dad, he said they were cockle shells, said the council must have saved themselves some money by lifting the sand from a beach somewhere. I laid the shells out on the deck to make pictures. Then, when it was time to go, Gypsy buried them underneath the gangplank. But every time she went to dig them back up, they weren't there. They'd been scattered all through the sandpit again. It was a hot day when Gypsy first started worrying about the sand. Dad had bought us Mr. Freeze's. Mine was a blue raspberry flavoured one, and Gypsy's was pink. I was making a picture of an octopus on the deck with the shells. Gypsy wouldn't dig for more. She said the sand felt funny. It kept moving between her fingers. She was sat next to me on the deck when the boys came into the playground with their bikes. They circled round a few times, then dumped them by the gate. They ran up and down the slide and pushed the swings so hard they flew up over the bar. When they ran up the gangplank, Gypsy put her hands over my picture. "What's that supposed to be?" I didn't say anything. Through the nearest porthole, I could see Dad wasn't looking. He was reading his paper. I wondered if I should shout. "Looks like a cat with a load of willies to me," the shortest boy said. The other two laughed. Then the boy who hadn't said anything walked right up to the picture and stamped on it. Gypsy got her fingers out of the way just in time. He stamped and stamped and stamped until the shells were in tiny pieces that slipped into the cracks between the planks of the deck. When they'd rode off on their bikes, Gypsy tried to dig the slivers of shell out, and one piece stuck in her finger like a splinter. She had to pull it out with her teeth. After that, whenever we got to the playground, Gypsy wanted to play on the slide or the climbing frame, or, when they weren't tangled up, the swings. She didn't want to play on the ship anymore, and she couldn't stand on the sand without falling over. I still liked the ship. I wasn't going to let some stupid boys take it. I guarded it from them and the little kids and the seagulls by myself. It was a drizzly, windy day when Gypsy saw the tentacle. She was stood at the top of the slide and she screamed and screamed. I couldn't see anything. Dad came running. On the way home, Dad wouldn't hold her hand even though she was crying. He said she was stupid, that she scared him half to death. It'd just been a bit of black bin bag or something, blowing in the wind. When the wind blew, the ship creaked. I liked watching it make wave patterns in the sand. I wasn't going to give the ship up, but it wasn't as much fun without Gypsy. I told her she could have 2 of my penny sweets if she came and sat on it with me. Then I tried saying she could have half the bag. She still wouldn't come. It was a Saturday morning when there were no leaves on the trees. It had rained in the night. The sand looked wet. I jumped down into it from the ship and pretended I was sinking. I shouted help just loud enough so that Gypsy would hear, but Dad wouldn't. She came running, but as soon as she stepped onto the sand, I jumped back up onto the gangplank. I was laughing. She plunged downwards, so that only the top half of her was sticking out. She screamed and fought the sand, flinging her arms about. There was sand in her eyes, and it coated her teeth and tongue. I screamed too. Dad's paper blew away in the wind. I saw it fly overhead with the seagulls. He left his can on the bench. He jumped in and managed to push Gypsy out onto the gangplank. We stayed there screaming until the old lady and the man with the dog came and told us to get down. Everyone says Dad can't have drowned in the sand, but he did. Thank you.